Hello to my friends around the world. This is the beginning of 2012, and I wanted to take a look backwards and forwards into what has been and what probably will be. 2011 proved to be a year of economic turmoil. The economy of the world is hinging now and in the near future upon the viability of the European Union. And the European Union is a typical example of amalgamating oil and water. As long as there's agitation, the division is not obvious. But when the agitation ceases and stability is established, you clearly see the demarcation line between oil and water. The line between the northern economies of perhaps France, Great Britain, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Germany, of course, and some of the Eastern European nations, and the southern portion of Europe, the Greece, Portugal, Spain, and Italy, is so obvious now that it demonstrates the fact that it's not possible to unite polar opposites, cultural and economic opposites. And this is in effect what has happened in Canada in its long history of amalgamating what in effect is the Greece of Canada, Quebec, with the rest of the country. Ontario, I suppose, is culturally somewhat similar to Western Canada, but vastly different economically. And what we have in the economy of Canada is the forced union of polar opposites. Quebec has a total cultural and economic affinity with basically socialism. And the viability of Quebec's amalgamation with Canada has always been problematic. The only thing that has kept it viable is the enormous resource wealth of Western Canada being amalgamated with the deficit, basically, of Quebec's social system, and the Ottawa opportunity to benefit from the exchange. In other words, they rob the West, feed Quebec. And in effect, Europe has been trying to do the same thing, robbing Germany and the productive northern nations to subsidize the overly socialistic and frequently not economically viable social programs of Greece and Italy, Spain, and Portugal. So what I'm saying about all this is simply that smaller nations closer to the people governed, both in Europe and in Canada, is the only alternative to the past chaos that has basically destabilized the whole economy of the world through the European Union's lack of viability and the trouble with Canada, which ultimately will require the small nation of Western Canada to emerge, whether it be British Columbia and Alberta or the 4 western provinces and 2 northern territories. That's for each province to decide. And it's equally true that the people of Europe are not in favor of the European Union. By and large, they don't want their tax dollars paying for somebody else's benefits, any more than the average Western Canadian wants our resource wealth and our tax dollars paying for the bankrupt governments of Quebec and to a certain extent, Ontario. Because what would Ontario have if it wasn't for Western resources? What sustains the economy of Ontario? Export of automobiles? No, it doesn't happen. And so, my friends, the problems of 2011, looking forward into 2012, demonstrate the necessity and the importance of smaller nations closer to the people governed, including Scottish independence, which is also an emerging phenomenon, and the fight between London and Edinburgh about when that referendum will be held is going to be an interesting question, resolved one way or the other for the independence of Scotland, and I hope in the future for the independence of Western Canada.